All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the regular meeting of the ReGen Finance Committee. It's May 7th at 9 o'clock. So I'll call this meeting to order. Ida, can I have a roll call, please?
Chair Shirley?
Here.
Vice Chair Blackwolder?
Here.
Director Delgado?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Great, thanks. I'll open this up to public communications. Anyone wishing to address us on anything on the agenda? Do we have anyone online?
No, I know.
Okay, all right, I'll close public communications, move on to our discussion for A, approve the finance committee minutes for March 5th. Any thoughts on these minutes?
So the meeting I said on Zoom.
Yes. Yeah,
So I move approval.
okay,
Second.
okay, great. All right, well, I don't think we have any public comments, so, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay. Move on to 4B, review of the finance committee bylaws for 2025. So this is something we need to do annually.
Yes,
I'm assuming there weren't any changes made from.
no changes, no recommendations from council on the bylaw, so, okay to move forward and approve.
Okay. Directors, any thoughts on these?
Move to approve.
Okay,
Second.
all right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. All right, I guess, yeah, okay, we just had to review them. I don't know if we actually have it. All right, 4C, fiscal year 25-26 final budget.
Thank you, Chair. At this time, we're gonna have Helen Rodriguez present some of the significant changes that we had from the budget preliminary review. And we are just really gonna highlight the items that were there. The items that we encountered along the way as we were in the preliminary major were the loss of Watsonville tonnage, which really made staff go back and look at other areas where we can possibly contribute to the savings of the shortfall of roughly a little over $2 million of annual from that agreement. At this time, we'll have Helen share her presentation for the committee.
Thank you for giving that review, Ida. Can you please go to the first slide? So just as a reminder, this is the requested rate increases that will be coming to the board on May for approval and for the public hearing and for the board meeting coming up. And the solid waste is increasing 5.2% from 77 to 81. The C&D as well, the same thing. And clean wood and residential organics increasing 4.3% from 47 to 49, and commercial organics from 67 to 69. In addition to this is the increase in single stream recycling from $40 to $41. Next slide, Ella. So the major elements in the budget, we had the 5.2% increase in disposal fee rate. However, when we did all the projections with the anticipated reduction in regional volume, the disposal fee revenue decreased by 1.5% due to the lower revenues, despite the increase of 5.2% in the fee rates. The MERP revenue continues to remain the same at 14.1%, increasing 14.1% from the fiscal budget of 2025. The power revenue decreased by $300,000, roughly 16.7% from the fiscal 25 budget. That is based on the current lower run times that we are experiencing in this fiscal year. So all in all, the total revenue decreased 1% from the fiscal 2025 budget. So, and then the employment costs increased 12.4% from the budget, 17% over the fiscal 24 budget. This is due to the new MOUs that were signed last year with certain market adjustments, CPI adjustments, and then of course step increases, as well as increases in our workers' comp and certain other liability. There was also a change from the insurance from an 85-15 split So now the district covers 85% of the health insurance costs. So non-salary increases, costs increased 13.7 or 9.6 over 24. And the net income decreases 69.6% from fiscal 25 and decreasing 21.8% from 24. Next slide, please. So the next slide kind of highlights what the changes were from the last time it was presented to the board. So as you can see, we decreased the disposal fee based on what we now know as far as volumes that we could potentially lose in the next fiscal year. So it was decreased by 1.6 million, or roughly an additional 3.6. Against the 24-25, you can see it's a $650,000 decrease from the budget, or 1.5%. Everything else remains the same. Power sales, we increased by 300,000. Run rate right now is about 1.8, but we anticipate with all the items that we're fixing that we probably will have a slightly lower downtime, runtime. And so we're decreasing, making it go from 1.2 to 1.5 versus 1.8. Then cost of employment, you can see there's no change there. The only change in the non-salary expenses was the recycling fee from 4 million to 4.8. And the reason for that is our current run, our current trend right now is roughly 4.8 per annum. So we make sure to keep that in mind. And those are the services really that we kind of pay to Keep Day and various other recycling, but primarily it's the Keep Day fee. So net change, as you can see, we went from 4.5 million to 2.4 million in net income or net change in position. And roughly, that is roughly 5.6 million lower than the budget from last year. Next slide, item. So in the capital outlay, there was only one change, and that was in the capital improvement, and that was a reduction of 1.1 million. We went back through the capital projects, capital outlay needs, and kind of went through and said, okay, what can we realistically achieve this year versus what we would like to achieve. So we started going through and really analyzing what is achievable or what is must do today. So that's how we went through that. Next slide.
Before you move on this one on the capital outlay, we're still in the process of analyzing the actual expenses 21 and also the cast and trying to realize those as we're in the procurement process of meeting those expectations. We want to know where they're going to lie exactly. So you may see a little bit changes here due to those two projects. But those are projects that we've been wanting to complete and accelerate to get done. Only one concern with 21 KD that is apparent to us is equipment. And so equipment has been identified for the final transmission from ReGen over to Monterey One Water, that could be delayed until April of next year. So March, April of next year, potentially. We are working on how can we give them power now and maybe redesign that final stage of how we're gonna connect to one another. So there's concerns of the redundancy of having to connect and then disconnect to connect the other pieces of equipment, but we're looking at alternative pathways that maybe we can achieve sooner than later. So we'll revisit this item as we approach the final hearing on it, so that we can be pretty clear on the pathway to achieve 21 KV and cast. And I think that would support everyone that put it there.
Just one note on the why. What happened was the M1W point of connection, the switch gear that they had, it had a catastrophic failure. So it arc flashed, so it kind of damaged the point of connection. They retrofitted it so it works, but we would need to get confirmation that we can still connect into it. So we're we're trying to do some workarounds, but that's really all of the project stuff was all designed and in place. It's that point of connection that we need to confirm is stable enough for us to connect them to.
And so are we waiting on them to figure that out?
Yeah, it's
That sounds
really in M1W's court to figure out how they're getting a brand new switchgear to replace that piece that was damaged.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the part that's delaying everything. So do we connect into the old one that was damaged, or do we wait and connect into the new one that's gonna be delivered in a year? So we're eager to get the project connected and get things going, so we've been supportive of them finding a workaround.
So they wanna find work.
Yeah, we're working
Okay.
together to see if we can do a workaround, but it may or may not make sense depending on the health of the existing
Got it.
switchgear.
And that would also be a missing element to the revenue aspect as well.
Mhm.
We have worked with Deborah to give her some background and history of where we're at, what the intent of the MOU was,
Mhm.
but also to give her enough context so we can start working on a purchasing power agreement. I also met with their executive director, Paul Sudo, to kind of discuss that here's where we're at, we're very close. But we've got to get prepared and have a purchasing power agreement that relates to today's date and time, and where the cost associated today's in time, and then kind of get those items rectified. That's probably gonna include runtime, and penalties for not achieving runtime and distribution power that we would try to mitigate any of those risks as we move forward in protection. So we're gonna start working alongside as a project getting completed to complete a purchasing power agreement that could go into play at the time that we start transmitting power over to Monterey One Water. I think other aspects that we want to make sure that we're really intentful around is what the bills cost us and what that return time period is with Monterey One Water as well, because we wouldn't want to have a 8-year return period and then be told in year number 2 or 3 that we don't need the power no more. So those are the things that we're gonna have to look at, make sure that in that agreement that we're covering and mitigating the risk for our organization for going those extra steps to develop a pathway to generate power for. So there's still a little bit of that going on, and so we really want to have it done. The team did take the challenge of getting it done a month early, so we're pretty happy that we're a month early, but we're also still trying to tidy up the ends to this budget process.
Bruce.
Yeah, I was wondering in ballpark figures, what the cost of the temporary workaround would be and what the revenue loss would be if we didn't do the workaround.
We looked at it on the back of a napkin. I think, we think it's roughly about $200,000. We think that the revenue would exceed the cost of doing that, so we would be in a position that we would want to support that if that comes to discussion. But we're right at the inception of could we develop a design that would overcome the challenge, and we have an idea of what that would look like. So it's a great question. We did look at it. We think it's about $200,000.
And just to clarify, who would be paying that $200,000? The damage side is on M1W's side. It's their need to make the workaround, where we have a project that's bringing the energy to them, but it's not really this project's issue that caused the delay. So it's really, we're talking to M1W of who would pick up that tab for that workaround, and that's in discussion, but it's really an M1W topic to cover. So I don't think that would be our expense, or I would argue that it wouldn't be our expense to find a workaround.
Yeah, so my concern would be, I think you guys are way ahead of me on this, I'm sure, but if they said, no, we're not in a big hurry. And we're saying, actually, we would make money if you were, so maybe some cost sharing before they gave it up and just waited for the permanent option. If we're gonna lose by waiting for the permanent option, then it's like maybe we need to cost share, so we end up gaining.
Both sides are eager to get the project connected. they are gonna have a reduced costs on their end for buying our power because it's at less than PG&E. Every day they wait, they're paying PG&E prices. So they're also eager on their side to find a workaround. They believe we do have a workaround. Again, the issue is the health of that point of connection. So even if we connect into it, can that switchgear take that load safely? And that's the check that needs to be done before we start talking about a workaround. If that switchgear can't take that load safely, if the manufacturer doesn't give us a clean bill of health, then we are gonna have to wait until next year to connect into their system.
Thank you. I have another question. It's nickels and dimes, and I don't know when's the right time to bring it up. But the cameras on Lapis Road, you know, I'm thinking maybe the city and this district share in the cost, you know, it's probably 15, 20 grand to get better cameras that can actually result in more citations. But I don't know where in this process we discuss that.
This is outside 21 KV, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
he's changed
Right,
topics.
sorry, yeah.
Maybe let's have
Helen.
Helen finish the presentation and then we can go for other specifics.
Great, thank you.
So the, one more other item that may change before the budget, presentation on board is the CPI for the wage increases. Currently, the budget includes 3.5%, but the April CPI will not be posted until about May 15th, right before the board meeting. So we're still waiting on that, and what I'm hearing in that is that it's roughly going to be about 2.5%. So, we're gonna wait and see before we make that change. Next slide item.
And just to follow up on that item, so you may see final budget prepared to go out. And rate schedules would not be approved until that number is published by the Oakland, San Francisco indices.
So, here we have the cash position, we're starting with, roughly, 31.5 million, and ending at 32.7 million. As you can see, cash from operations is generating $11 million. However, we have all this capital outlay, the bond payments, reducing that by 9.8 million, 9.9 million. So we have an increase in cash of 1.1 million for the year. And I went ahead and projected the next 3 fiscal years so you can see where we're at. So next slide, Ida.
Helen, can you just
Yes.
real quick, can you explain the line adjustments to cash? What does that mean?
So adjustments to cash means non-cash items that hit the income from operations. The amortization and depreciation, those are non-cash. The closure post-closures, those are non-cash. So we add those back because they don't use up the cash from the revenues we generate.
Okay.
So that's what those are. So that's really what the item adjustments to cash are, is really those two items. The amortization and depreciation on the P&L that you see in the budget packet,
Right,
and the closure post-closure costs.
okay,
Because those are book entries,
right,
more so than cash entries.
I see, okay.
So here's the breakdown of the cash. As you can see, we have a restricted cash. This is our closure post-closure financial assurance. This is something we report to CalRecycle annually, and it's currently at 2.5 million. And then we have the board designated cash, the operating reserve, which is the 20% reserve, which is 9.3 million. The closure post-closure reserve is, the closure reserve is 750 per annum. The board approved that, and then the post, yes. And then the closure, no, excuse me, the closure is $550,000 per annum, and the post-closure is $250,000 per annum. So by the end of 2025, beginning of 25-26, there will be 1.5 million. The capital infrastructure is based on a percentage of the infrastructure. So it's 3.7 million, and the capital equipment reserve to replace equipment is 1.9 million. So total designated is 3.92. Just a reminder, this board designated is just that, it's designated. It can be undesignated if we need it for operations. Okay. So at this point, for the budget, anticipated unrestricted cash available for operations should it be needed is roughly 13.8 million. So again, total cash is gonna be 32.7 million. Next slide. Thank you. Oops. So this is just a quick summary of the major items for the non-employment expenses. As you can see, the highest item we have is our recycling fee. And again, this is the one to keep day, $4.8 million. Repair and maintenance that we have, environmental services. These are fees that we pay for, tower cycle fees, so forth for environmental fees and stuff like that. And then operating supplies, as you can imagine, operating supplies have increased quite a bit. And then our insurance and so forth down the line. So, next slide. And then the last slide just summarizes all the mobile equipment and capital equipment projects that we have. Good question.
Okay, great. Directors, do you have questions?
I have a question on the second to last slide, the bar graph. The operate the landfill, except for employees, where does that cost? Is that environmental services, you know? And so all the costs of the landfill that aren't paying people, where do those come into that bar graph?
It's kind of split among all of this, with the exception of the recycling services, because there's some repairs and maintenance, there's some environmental services, there's some operating supplies, so it's kind of broken down into here. But if you look at your budget packet, in the back there, we summarize what the expenses are, and it is on page 29, excuse me, not 29. Let's see, where is it? On page 27, you can see all the costs associated with the landfill. Down on the landfill operations and stuff.
So those costs get split into these bar graph
That's
categories.
correct. With the exception of salaries and employment.
Okay, so all the gas monitoring, the new light eye system and all that, is that in environmental services?
Guard, I don't believe so. I think environmental services is different.
Oh, well, the LOSI system that we bought, we actually treated that as a capital item. So it's not showing up in any of these expense line items. It's actually gonna show up as an depreciation expense.
Okay.
You'll see the day-to-day operation like services to it that are additional costs on top of the
Maintenance of it.
original.
And would they go environmental
Yes,
services?
they would.
Okay, and then all the lab costs for, you know, analyzing the data that's collected, that's all environmental services?
Yes.
That's correct.
Bruce, did you wanna address your other question?
Well, then I was just asking when was the right time to do it. So I guess we're getting close. But I have a much more important question than that little project I was mentioning. And that's, I missed last board meeting, but when I look at the first two slides, the first slide talks about our proposed increases in rates and, you know, 3% to 5.2, depending on which of the 5 categories. So basically a 5% increase. Then the second one gives kind of the bad news that there's a disposal revenue decrease of 1.5, total revenue decrease of 10.9 over fiscal 2024, employment costs going up 12% and 17% over 2024, non-salary costs going up 13%, net income decreasing 69%. So to me, the bad news is outweighing the good news. So my first question is, was there discussion at the last board meeting about raising rates more than the 3 to 5%?
Yes.
How did that go?
The board was willing to support it. Staff really makes the recommendation that we would have had to go 2 months out, so the loss of the revenue over that two-month period could impact us more than going back and getting that percentage. The goal is 11 years, to achieve that independency that we've been talking about, workshop, guiding principles. And we want to see what year one results. There's gonna be some wins on the ReGen side. There's the win at the gate rate, and we want to keep the trajectory, and we want to see what that results going into year number 2. And then we can entertain, is there still a significant revenue gap between the wins and the losses of that revenue? It was, as you were aware, in our chair and vice chair debrief, I was not very happy with it because we had anticipated a larger step in revenue towards independency in year number 1 than we're actually gonna see in the result of because of the loss of 1.8 million. There will be an item at our board meeting that discusses Watsonville and what are the opportunities for our organization to mitigate that risk. So that's gonna be an item that we hold off on for that discussion, because we wanna hear the position of the board. That's gonna have a contribution in itself. So I think at this point, we wanted to stay steadfast of that increases. See that revenue grow. You can see the revenue spike, which is intentful. We wanna see our revenue grow as we lose agreements. But that one was a little bit sooner than what we expected. And I think it also sends a red flag with other agreements that have early termination clauses in them that may hinder the organization before it's ready for them to expire. And this is that example of that happening before we expected it to happen. So our philosophy and our goal is to be independent, yet we are forced to be more independent sooner than what we were expected to. And I think the board is encouraged by seeing the results happen and then staff making those adjustments it needs to make at the next budget period and allowing that 10-year period process to allow to gradually get to that independency and not really force it in year number 1. Because I think 5% was a big ask. It's what we've been asking for. It's kind of been the trajectory. It would have been hard to digest any more than that. I think at this time, we're happy where we're headed to. We did also talk about the capital amount of money that we had on the site. You've been here for 15 years, so when we did the bond to get the MRF, we did the bond to get the truck yard, and then there was a rebonding. So when we look at cash, cash has been done because we rebonded to have cash to execute on projects. And we're at that position now that we want to execute on that project. The board is gonna have to realize that our cash availability is gonna dwindle down as we close these projects up, 21 KV, CASP, any other projects that we wanna finish up here, are gonna eat up a little bit of that cash, but you can also see other things that are occurring. Our liabilities are going down, and our what we have in excuse me, I draw a blank on our capital outlay projects. We want to get those done in advance. So we're seeing the rise and then our costs go down. I think we're gonna be in good shape, and I really wanted to show the board that we're in a position for us to continue to execute where we're at without having to go back and revise the notifications to the public to execute on that higher increase.
Felipe, I just want to, so this budget is built on the idea that we will that income from Watsonville, but we don't know 100% for sure.
Agreed.
That's right.
Okay, so it's a possibility, it's not such a grim outcome as what, but I mean, we're just being really conservative and planning for that, just in case.
Yes, so we're evaluating the Watsonville agreement to see potential opportunities to mitigate some of that risk within that agreement. And at some point, we'll have to have a discussion with Watsonville to see their position as well. And depending on the board position of guidance of how they would like us to pursue.
All right, I'm gonna defer to, I'm sorry I missed that meeting, but I'm just concerned that by waiting another year, if things don't turn around, then next year we're gonna have to have more increase. Whereas if we got ahead of it, and next year turned out rosier than we think, then we could have had a less increase, which is always good news. I'm always in favor of trying to get on top of something sooner than later. But I guess my final question, to beat a dead horse is, I understand the 2-month lag, but is that something that could be considered mid-year?
It could be.
And if not mid-year, then I think what you're suggesting is, if we're gonna start raising rates more than we traditionally have, let's prepare for that next year. Give ourselves 12 months from now and or whatever the number of months is, and do it then.
I think if we get more aggressive than what we are, that is gonna require outreach and notifications too as to why. And getting more communities notified on the intent of and the actual realization of the rates going up, right? So if we're gonna go 7.5, maybe 8.5 or 9%, I think there needs to be campaigning around that for every city is, here's the reasons why. And yes, we pay a little now, but in the long run, we benefit tremendously through that process, so. And I would definitely showcase that the board and the staff feels we're getting ahead already by changing the philosophy around the view and adding a little bit more to the traditional gate rate. So in theory, we're getting ahead, although we see some anomalies pop up that will hinder us, but it does force our teams to execute a little bit better, to be more efficient and to reduce costs along the way. So I like the challenge for the staff. That's why we went back in there and said, let's reduce a little bit of what we anticipated in getting done. So there's contributions through staff, there's contributions through gate rate. Let's see the outcomes in year number one after we've kind of fixed our philosophies and see what other challenges could arise in year number one so that we can focus on them as we round the year. Early January would be appropriate for us to start analyzing again and seeing where we're at and what the results have yielded for the organization.
Okay, regarding philosophy, another reason to raise rates in the future more than we might otherwise is to put more into CalPERS, which we've shown actually saves us in millions of dollars. By ponying up sooner, we save more money later. So I think that argument would be fairly well received when people think we pay more now to save more in the long run. But that's just one more reason to raise the rents more than traditionally, but that's for the future.
Agreed. Yeah, thank you for the feedback. I think it was the board had the discussion around, you know, I think Director Dory brought it up is, do we need to consider raising rates now? And I think it's too early for us to hit the emergency bell and alarm. I think we can start executing on what's designed to execute, and we got, you know, it's still a good decade to go. But this really brings to light for the future is, how do we protect ourselves again? And this was the reason why, when we look at Monterey One Water purchasing power and agreement, that we would need a term to cover the liabilities of the organization and not have an early out for them. And this is what we're seeing with the city of Watsonville. And there is, again, we'll come back after we've gone through the articles and give some points of influence for the board to recognize and then make some comprehensive decisions for staff to pursue.
Yeah, so there's the 10-year emergency not wanting to ring the bell,
Yeah.
but then there's the non-emergency CalPERS opportunity to save money.
And we are making the additional AU payment already. We've already started that.
I understand we're giving more to it, but if we gave more plus more to it, then we would save more than we are saving now in the long run.
Agreed.
Now, that little tiny item, it's a tiny item, but it's a 2-mile gateway on Lapis Road and Del Monte Road. How much trash you see. And I'm disappointed, I guess it's another capital project. I'm disappointed walking in today. I haven't seen the outside of this area look worse than it does today. Maybe it has looked as bad as it is today. And that's why a few years ago, we started hearing more talk of let's be more proud of our environs as you walk into our building, the landscaping I'm talking about. And so, a very small amount of money for better cameras, maybe cost sharing with the city. It's outside the city limits, but it impacts the city too. We don't want it looking trashy. And it impacts, the optics of our environs here in this district to have those gateways looking trashy. And so if we did some kind of a cost sharing, maybe the city gives 10 grand and the district gives 10 grand, and that 20 grand, it funds the county's ability, except for their staff, but it funds the equipment that the county uses to monitor the cameras and proceed through the citation process. They're having a hard time citations because the cameras aren't good enough. There maybe not enough of them. So there's a couple of capital small expenses. I don't know how small landscaping is, but the landscaping budget and the camera budget, I don't know in here where it is, if it is at all. Well, I know the landscaping would be in here, but can we talk about that?
Sure.
Which landscaping are you specifically talking about, the front door here to the admin office or at the front gate?
Yeah, the front, well,
Or
I was
all from the front gate?
first seeing the parking lot and the front door. And then looking down toward Last Chance, it looked like it just continued in bad shape with weeds and stuff. And so it was freshed up about a year or two ago, and it looked really nice when it was freshed up, and now it's unfreshed. So I guess from Last Chance Mercantile up the hill to the parking lot, to the front door, this area here. But if I saw other areas, I'd probably maybe think the same thing, but that's what the public and everybody sees coming for business. So let's talk about that. So everything on that, outside that front door, down to Last Chance, all the landscaping, medians, that kind of thing. What kind of budget do we have now, and what kind of budget do we need to make it look better?
So the board did approve a landscaping, projection for some zones in there. It hasn't been at the top of our list to do, some of what you see out front is because we're finishing off the scale house project. And the restroom project were designated to be completed by the end of May. I believe, ops cut all this grass here, its growth, they didn't have an opportunity before cars started rolling and to sweep it up, so this evening they'll get to it. We've been taking care of Charlie Benson very well. So I'm not, it's the growth that we'll get annually, and we'll get a lot of it, during the springtime to about October, November. So we have to be diligent. It's in our run rate, so we don't have to do anything about that. On the camera side, we as an organization contribute to many, cleanup events and also contribute to the county and other facets. So Zoe, if you wouldn't mind covering some of those. I think if the board is supportive of doing another $10,000 for additional cameras, I think we're on board. I think it's the right thing to do. What I do want to see is the county be more aggressive with its plan to uphold some of the penalties that are being seen in daytime. So when I hear that the lack of cameras, that could be overnight, but Jameson's been involved with that communication. Jay's been involved with that communication on a daily basis. So we recognize when materials are there, and we pretty know instantaneously whether that was dumped in the middle of the night, because they say we're not able to tell who that is. But there is instances that have occurred in the day that have gone without penalty, or even just a discussion around prevention of that. It's just kind of out of mind, out of sight. So I would like to see more of what that plan is from the county, Marina, and ReGen would look like on Lapis. Before we say we're gonna commit, and I'd like to put the money there and designate it there.
We're not
But-
spending it until we have.
But also have the ability to undesignate it because there is no plan or there is no follow through on it. I would rather give some contributions to the people that are really working on it, whether that be citizens for Marina for the cleanups and helping their organization for their nonprofit. I think those are adding value because those are the consistent folks that continue to show the value in keeping our area clean, along with, Jameson sends his team out there on a pretty regular basis. I think
We're pretty much daily now, have the guys in the landfill operations department doing the rounds, and I see them in the morning. I'm usually busy towards the end of the day, but we're very active out there.
I know, thank you.
Yeah, I think there was refrigerator rocks, the other day, we got that, there was a couple things on the side of the road that. We continually monitor, but again, it's, when the loose debris is all out, how much time do we spend investing on the litter pickup piece? And that's where you guys have done a phenomenal job on a monthly together. Anywhere from 10 to 30 bags of loose debris that occurred on that roadway, but.
I think you
willing to
guys,
support.
you're having more of an impact of what Jameson and all of his colleagues are doing, and Jay, but it's not really sustainable, and it's not something we wanna sustain, right? It doesn't make sense. You gotta get at the cause, not just the symptoms, but thank you for addressing the symptoms. And I think the bottleneck is Maria at the county, it's a collateral duty for her.
Yeah.
And she's not able to bulldog it like it needs to be bulldogged, even if they have the proper equipment. But they're not getting citable license plates and enforceable observations, like truck comes in, person seen unloading the refrigerator, there's a license plate, we're not getting that, that would hold up in court. We're getting, truck comes in with refrigerator on the ground, but there's no, you wouldn't hold up in court to say that you dropped your refrigerator.
Mm.
So it's kind of like that, and so that, I agree with you, there needs to be a powwow to figure out if the money can be spent to result in citations or not, given the labor the county has to process.
Yeah, and we're willing to support, and I think it's so insignificant to the overall budget that we would better tap into that 10, 15 grand whenever we needed to, the board's willing to support.
Okay.
Can I add a little bit about what we're doing
Sure.
thus far on illegal
Sure.
dumping? So, so my team sits on an illegal dumping and litter abatement task force with Maria Ferdine, and we're very involved in the issue at a county level. And we're always advocating specifically for, I mean, the majority of the dumping, I think, happens in the Salinas Valley if we were to, equate the two sides. But here, we're always advocating for Lapis and Del Monte specifically, and that's why the cameras ended up in that corridor. My staff just attended, and I attended as well remotely, a county board of supervisors meeting on this particular topic. And we were happy to hear that there were some citable actions as a result of those cameras and some mitigation that happened. They decided not to cite, but they found the individual who had dumped, and I think that's happened on 3 occasions. There was one that the person was not able to be found despite being on the camera, so.
TV, the guy on TV.
The guy on TV, yeah, the first one who dropped the mattress. So I think there's more to be done. They talked about potentially moving cameras around, adjusting things. They talked about also moving them in different places in the county, potentially putting decoy cameras up. What efficiencies could be made with enforcement. I don't know if there's anything there, but they were talking about using license plate reader cameras that the sheriffs have. And, if there's any kind of coordination, I don't know if that'll go anywhere, but that was the discussion from the board. But what ReGen Monterey supports so far, and it's come piecemeal a little bit. We've done 3 years worth of supporting the county cleanup efforts with Smith and Enright being a contractor to the tune of $25,000 each year. We have Adopt a Highway. We have 2 different Adopt a Highway 2-mile stretches that are adjacent to our site to make sure any litter that falls out of trucks, that sort of thing, gets cleaned up. So that's $8,600 a year to have those.
Does it pay our staff to go out? Or-
No, we pay a contractor that has Caltrans certification to be able to do that specific cleanup. So that's $8,100 out of our budget to do the cleanup.
I've never noticed the impact or the results of that work.
I have, because I travel this road, they were out here just the other day, and a lot of times they'll put their refuse that they've collected on the southbound entrance to the freeway from Del Monte. You'll see like piles of trash there. That's from this crew.
Some of the occasional photos I sent of additional illegal dumping, I think that's where she's talking about too. On the
Yeah.
shoulder.
On
So
the
what-
shoulder, yeah.
Which road segments do they typically clean?
You'll see signs, so just after, there's like a bridge after, what is it, the exit? Reservation.
Life Fighter, 13th Street, 12th Street.
Well, it's here south, so it's the northbound lanes there's like a little overcrossing bridge, just kind of over, I guess, what would be the Cemex plant road. So it starts there and it's 2 miles this way.
So it's Highway 1.
It's Highway 1. Oh yeah,
Okay.
it's all Highway 1, excuse me.
Okay.
Sorry if that was not clear.
Yeah, I
That's
was
what the
thinking
Adopt a
Lapis
Highway
Del-
program is.
Got it.
Yeah, and then it's also 2 miles southbound that starts north of us, so it's just adjacent to our site. We also have the disposal voucher program, of which I know you're very familiar. I don't have an actual dollar amount for that. And then new this year, we've put aside $20,000 because we've been requested. We haven't signed up for this yet. But we set aside and earmarked $20,000 for a potential marketing campaign for illegal dumping, which would be a collaborative effort. So that was the request. Again, it's not been approved, but so far we're at $53,600 a year towards illegal dumping that's happening outside of our site, not in our area. So, I mean, I think it's pretty significant. Could there be more done? Definitely, and I'm happy to, chat more about further solutions, but we've not gotten any requests to do anything more around the cameras specifically at this point.
We have received a request from Monterey County to renew the MOU, and I think
Correct.
that was 20.
25,000, and if that's your purview, we would be bringing it to the board within the next month or two.
And
For next
I had a bunch of questions around that too, so
It's related to cameras.
no, it's related to the actual services that are being rendered, so we're contributing 25 grand to that, program.
It's a countywide program.
I wanna know where they're at,
Yes,
right? I wanna know where the majority of those cleanups are. I know that Salinas Valley contributes a higher amount, so I would expect a lot more happening in the other segment of our flow control area. But I would also like to know where they're being done, and I would like to be able to influence where those are being done. To change a little bit of that, just the contribution, we're in an MOU, there's 25,000, do whatever you want, and whatever you want. The county uses external labor for it, so they're not using county resources in those attempts. So just like us with Adopt the Highway, it's somebody else that's probably certified to do those cleanups, coming and doing them. So evaluating what those kind of costs are in that run rate. So I just wanted to know a little bit more before we come into another MOU. And is that the right place we want to? Do we discontinue and again, put our resources where they're more,
Localized.
well, they're localized to ReGen, right? Localized to our pathway, whether it's more on internal cleanups for our landscape, or is it that little external gateway that leads here, right? And that gateway is from your back door to our front door,
And Highway 1.
and the Highway 1 coming here as well. So that's where we're seeing it. I think the Adopt the Highway 1 is doing its intent. Litter coming from disposal trucks and of that nature that tend to fly off, or you get the phone call and I see debris flying out of the truck. Well, we're covering our segment that leads right into our front door. Those I see very effective. The ones that we have little awareness around is where I question how effective they are for what we expect out of those dollars for cleanup and presentation to our facility. But I think it's a great discussion. Thank you for the field. So,
Any other questions? I just had a few questions on the written budget portion. So, I guess this is on page 4. And I want to be clear, I'm not addressing the merit of this raise. I believe I understand it. But the increased compensation for the Director of Engineering and Compliance, I was wondering how that increase then puts that position in comparison to sort of market value. I know we've been trying to, adjust all of our salaries so they kind of are within the market. I was wondering that 4% increase, where does that put us for that position?
do you wanna?
Sure.
Yeah.
So as I recall, the 2024 total compensation study, the Director of Engineering was not identified as as one of the classifications that was below market. I don't remember exactly where it came in at, but my recollection is that it's within market.
Okay. So does this put us above market?
It would put it, it would put it.
I'm not sure. I would like to look at where he was at, because we did
Okay.
set a position on where the market was, that was negative 5% up to 10%. So I don't know for sure if it's gonna take them over the 10%.
Or,
But there is a mechanism that would be in place if it did. That mechanism is when what we executed with our employees and would be privy to the board if we wanted to execute on that would be when we exceed market, that we're doing the hold, right? And so the way we executed that with our frontline workforce or within our MOUs was that for the people that were over, we paid lump sum amounts that didn't impact the PERSable amount, annual amount, so they got a lump sum payment in that same value for the CPI. The people that were within that market got CPI, the people that were under the market, depending where they were at, we did increments of 5% to get them back to market. Example, if I was 3% under market, then I would get 3% plus the COLA to get into the market, and then continue that pattern there.
Yeah.
So that's how we're executing on it. So I don't have a clear answer, but we could have one for the board meeting on would he exceed by 1% or 2%,
okay,
or how much that.
okay, that would be good. Let me,
Can we talk more about that?
yeah,
Has the personnel committee had this discussion?
We have not.
I'm looking at the sentence on that page. It says, proposed pay increase is based on the incumbent's proven ability to be a significant contributor. So, to me, it begs the question of what other incumbents have proven the ability to be a significant contributor? I'm glad you left the room, because we can talk a little bit more openly. It looks like, he is being singled out for a pay increase, not because of the comps that we've just been talking about, but because of his proven ability. And it triggers, in my mind, the question, what about all the other directors, and what will the other directors think when they see this? But I would think, what about me? I'm doing my job really well too, and even though I'm not due an increase due to comps, maybe I'm due an increase just like this person is due, this position is due an increase. And so I guess I wanna ask just in general, where are we at looking at the performance of directors in the context of whether they deserve this kind of a, unsolicited merit increase or not, so that we stay kind of fair across the board. And we, the board, only have the purview to do that with the general manager, I guess, and our legal counsel. But I think the board does care that the system is fair and equal. And this looks a little bit unequal to me at a quick glance.
Do you have a question? Sounded like more like a statement than a question.
Well, I guess my only question was, it didn't go to the personnel committee. So I guess my other question was, are we anticipating a more thorough across-the-board review of directors so that everybody knows why one director is getting it, and why not the other directors aren't getting it?
So where do you wanna talk about director reviews that are done annually?
Sure, so, to answer the question about your first question about comp study, I pulled it up. The Director of Engineering Compliance, came in at -0.5%, in comparison to 10 other, comparators. And this was only in relation to salary.
So is that less than 1%, that number?
Yes, it's 0.5%, and also 4.3% above market and in consideration of total compensation. So that includes benefits. The study experts did advise that we focus on salary because the overall package was not, it did not make much of a difference as compared to other agencies. It's within the ballpark. So really, when we did the review, it was at focused only on the salary, so 0.5 below market. To answer the question in regards to directors' performance reviews, those are done annually. And Felipe completes the reviews for all of the directors. It's a form, a template that includes core competencies and also a section on goal setting. And he reviews each one of us on the core competencies and goal setting. And he also provides input on potential goals that he wants to assign each one of us. The process is done the process is completed by the general manager as he completes the review form, and then a meeting with the director to discuss in case there are any questions or individual discrepancies, my own self-assessment versus his impression of, we have that opportunity to discuss it.
And what authorization does board policy give the general manager to give merit increases or salary increases based on these evaluations?
So I'm not aware of a board policy or a personnel policy that allows for that, other than the pay step increases. So we have 6 steps in each classification. The general manager does have discretion to advance pay steps at his discretion, which has been done in the past.
Okay, so I guess a question, given what I just heard, Felipe, is why did you choose a 4% pay increase instead of an expedited step increase for this position?
Because I believe he was already at step 6, so he's already at his max out. So then you look at, okay, well, where's the growth opportunity for this employee over a longer period of time? Also, I think he faced, out of everybody, probably with the exception of Helen and I, faced a lot of challenges with the transition with Petroborg going out. I think Petroborg had a lot under his ability to do that. And I don't think David had a fair opportunity of easing into it. He's really had to jump right into executing the 21 KV. And these are items that you go back that exist maybe half a decade that have been in play, and they're not going to be executed until now. So there's been challenges with executing on getting those done. He's had to not only get his team prepared, but himself prepared. And then also we're doing stuff that we haven't seen in the past, and that's looking at those 10, 11-year projections and getting input from everybody to build a pathway for us to mitigate some of our risk and concerns that we have today. So I think there's that piece. So he was at the end of his capacity under his existing STEP program. He's been here for 10 years. I also believe that he's going to deliver some longevity for the organization, and he could potentially be one of the future general managers for the organization in the future. So I think he's bringing on other things that, Berta had also identified that these are things that we would expect from our engineer anyways. So that we can expect that from our engineers. I think he's faced a lot of challenges through this process, and we also want to make sure that there's still a room for growth period for him within our organization, and he doesn't lose that interest in what he's doing now elsewhere for maybe $1 or $2 of an increase. It would be very difficult for the organization to rebound and get somebody with 10 years of landfill experience and jump in there. So some of it is longevity, and some of it is all the effort he's had to put forward in this last year, which has been, again, probably above everybody else's. We have normal operation, along with a tandem of trying to execute on projects, along with a vision and a heavy contribution of what that vision could be based on his experience here at ReGen. Not saying that nobody else contributes. I just think he's been tasked with an abundance of doing work, not only here, but at home, and the work to try to come figure out how we're going to execute on it. And he's done a really good job to do it with his head up and to contribute to all the other directors at the same time.
Okay, I'll just say that I'm torn between guilt for nickel and diming. A small increase in our overall budget to give someone well-deserving versus feeling sort of guilt that it's not, or not guilt, but unease that it's not part of a process of sort of across the board consistent application or discussion. So those are my push and pull points here.
Sure. And the way this came about was a direct request from the employee, so it wasn't a general manager just out of the blue, hey, I'd like to give this guy a position. It was an employee position of, here's all the challenges that I've been faced against, and I'm kind of at my end of that salary pay, but again, this is a decision for the board to.
So I think there's some research that shows that men tend to ask for promotions and salary increases more than women, and they tend to get them. And that's why if we did it like a more thorough approach, then it wouldn't be due to any tendencies. It would just be because we looked at the big picture and we made these changes based on the big picture that was evenly applied to everybody. But he did the right thing, and I think you're doing the right thing and supporting him. I'm just not sure what the right thing for me as a board member to do, and that's why I'm voicing my confusion. I feel this way about one direction, and this way about the other direction. I have this confusion of feelings. It's not sitting 100% right for me, so I just wanted to see something, say something.
Bruce, you're really good at that, and I appreciate you for that. I agree. It does feel like someone is being sort of rewarded and singled out, and the others are sort of being ignored. And so if it was part of the process, I think you'd feel better. And, you know, whether that's through the annual review process, through, you know, looking at the market value of these, you know, positions. I'm curious how, this pay increase for the Director of Engineering and Compliance, now how that compares to the other directors, you know, does this, I know on the org chart, right, they're all sort of, you know, equal, you know, across the board, but they do probably get paid differently. And so I'm just wondering how that, you know, that increase shifts, that, you know. Jerry.
I think he's coming to a new position and he's filling some big shoes. And when you go through the process, you're losing somebody that's an integral part of the overall governance of this place. And to get somebody that's in-house, if you can find somebody and you have confidence in hiring somebody in-house, there's so many benefits to that. I would wager to say if we brought somebody from the outside in, that their cost would be astronomical and we'd have to pay it because it's an integral part of what we do here. So to me, it sounds like, in just a few words, I think they're kind of saying, it looks like he's doing the job that we hired him to do. And so he's being compensated. I just think it's a, you know, a unique position, a unique thing for him. I don't think it's gonna happen every month that he says, you know, I think I'm gonna need another 4%. I just think that it's an acknowledgement that our choice of him was warranted. So that's my,
We're talking a lot about personnel. And so
Yeah.
if we were to be process oriented, this conversation would be at the personnel committee.
Yeah.
But the
you brought it up.
I know. Well, my first question was, has the personnel committee addressed this? And I think I heard no.
Well, they're gonna be reviewing the budget, whether they pick that piece out. I'm not sure if they'll do that.
Yeah, it seems like a perfect topic for the personnel committee.
Yeah, we'll bring it up.
Okay.
We'll bring it up, that finance committee had a lengthy discussion around position around it.
Okay, that'd be great.
Now, if the personnel committee could hear the drift of our questions, that would be even better. Like, we were questioning if it'd be better to have a wholesale review versus singling out one now. You know, we were questioning the comps and, you know, it's not just, should we do it or shouldn't we? So I don't know if that can be conveyed, thank you.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna move on from this topic, and just, I think I just have very brief. So the commodity sales, we're looking to be increasing. Do we have any thoughts on tariffs? Is that gonna change any of that, like our crazy economy? Do you still expect? It could?
As of right now, we don't know.
I was curious, the public awareness costs on page 26, I think is decreased by 9%. I was just wondering what changes we're making in public education awareness.
Zoe just stepped out.
Oh, okay, I can move on to something else. Let's see, yeah, under repairs and maintenance, we're seeing an increase of 23%. We just have, are we gonna get a new baler? Are we, like, what's in that section? What's changing, I guess?
It's a combination of factors, you know, the equipment, you know, a lot of it's getting a year older. So we've got more upkeep costs pertaining to the equipment, and I think we have a couple of large landfill items that are coming up for what they call a periodic, you know, major servicing. You know, these major servicing costs can be 6 figures. So Those aren't an every year expense, but we've identified a couple that are coming up fiscal 26 for sure.
And I guess just one super hopefully quick last question. I know you reviewed the capital improvement projects and decreased that even more. I was wondering, is there one thing that we're putting off that you wish we didn't have to? Like, what's the one thing we're putting off that,
Well,
anything significant?
you'll see on there, the cast items pop up, and then anything tied to 21 KV, so.
But no, we're doing those. Is
We
there
are
anything
doing
we decided not to do? That you're like, oh, I really wish we could do that? Or is it all like reasonable decisions?
I think we're holding back on a lot of it, right? I mean, we had new engines for the LNG plant, so I think a year, every year after that. And the reason why we're not ready to do that is because we don't have a global plan of what that's gonna look like for us, so we're gonna be very curious in looking at additional feasibility steps on what are the attributes we wanna use landfill gas for, so is that all electricity? Or is that, RNG, renewable natural gas? And if you just look at it from the electrical standpoint, there's more that we can do. And it's just how fast we can get it done.
Okay.
It's roughly about, we probably make enough gas for about 10 megawatts of power, and we're only producing 5. So we really have to analyze how much are we putting to the flare, how much do we desire to continue to flare out when we're flaring out gas and we have other methods to generate revenue. It's almost like dollars are flying out the top end of that flare, so I just asked David 2 weeks ago, how is he feeling with bandwidth before we entered into starting to discuss what RNG or more electricity would look like for us here as a site. And he was readily available to take on more, at least around the curiosity aspects of how do we start being curious and investigating our position around those items. So the board will get more from staff as we start entering into those discussions and start seeing an outlay of what that could look like for us in the future. And then timeline on how fast. And we've been curious enough to look at RNG and electricity. And however we toggle the switch, well, we're looking at 2 to 3 years of time, probably a year's time for planning and permits, and then another year's time to mobilize, and then a third year to get it built and put everything into place. So we're still a little bit of ways there, but there's a significant rebound for us in revenue when we make that decision. So we're looking at anywhere between $2 to $3.5 million annual revenue contributions if we did expand from 5 megawatts to 10 megawatts of power, or into a position of selling RNG, renewable natural gas. And I think we can also look at the types of agreements that we're in. We're in a short-term agreement for our excess power, which yields the least amount of revenue. We can actually look at longer terms of giving power into the grid. Once we execute the 1.8 that we designated over to Monterey One Water, and see what that extra will look like short term. And then also there's a component in there with resiliency. The better you can be resilient, the better the return is. So we have to evaluate those. So we've been on a short-term agreement with that excess power for years and years and years of anticipation to deliver either to D-Cell or somewhere else. And we're not there. So if we're not there, then why don't we enter into a longer-term agreement where we can reap better revenue returns on the power that's being put in or supplied into the grid at the time of need. So I think we have good opportunities ahead of us. We just have to get some of those existing capital projects online and done, so that we can start projecting what those future ones will be. And again, getting significant projects done between here and 2036 are gonna be extremely important, because we're gonna lower down our risk, we're gonna lower down our capital project. Thus, our resiliency should be able to run our operations on solely the gate rate. And once we hit that point, we'll have to pick and choose where we wanna borrow money to execute on projects, or do we take short-term agreements for a benefit? So we take short-term agreements so we can build MRF 3.0 at $6 million. That's a 5-year deal with City of Ramos.
Okay. In the interest of time, I I think I'm gonna move on, or, oh, the director's okay.
Good.
Any last questions? We're good? No? Okay. Let's move into 4D, the potential new or amended disposal agreement with Waste Connections.
Just an update, and this is, in talking with Deborah, we wanted to have this item and we've had it executed in different ways and it should be in public privy, so we want to stay on that note where it's open to the public to have a discussion around an agreement that would expire March 30th of 2026. And they have interest in negotiating a 5-year term with us to 2031, the March 30th of 2031, which would be the 5-year term. This is for volume coming from San Benito County because they have limited capacity. Their outside of the county volume is now being floated to ReGen Monterey at this time. It's currently at 37.50 plus the CPI of 3.5, so it's a little over $38 and some change. It'll be a 5-year term. This is another agreement that would impact our position going into next year, so we could potentially have another loss of revenue that would be a value of about $2.4 million in revenue. This is one that I would like to go out and start negotiating. This is one where typically I would go out and do anyways, but because we've been working on guiding principles, I felt it was really important that share with the team, share with the board and get feedback on our position of, are we interested or do we want to face another challenge next year with the shorter revenue? I did have this discussion with the chair and really talked about what the pros and cons were. The con obviously is the loss of revenue. The pros is to continue to allow us to track a path, knowing that it's a short term, right? And so that short term would have an obligation or fulfillment for ReGen is just hold the line until we get further down and closer to our 2036 date. And then we can start planning for off-ramping that agreement. And then again, looking at other agreements in the future that could have early termination. This is an opportunity for us. When we look at the market, and this is where our bargaining will come into effect. You know, our gate rate is $77 a ton and it's gonna increase to $82 a ton. When I look at the gate rate for some of the areas where this material can go to, it's well above $100 a ton. So I see a 121 rate, I see a 129 rate. And this will be our challenge with bargaining, is being at a place where we don't lose the material, but also put ourselves in a better position with where we could be at in the future. So, you know, pushing towards a higher fee would be important for me, but also not overshooting the landing and losing the business and then putting us again in the same position next year to accelerate increases to achieve the goal of being independent. So this is just kind of want to hear from you guys on how you guys feel about it. So I pursue and come back with some opportunities and information sharing before we can execute on an agreement with Waste Connections. I do have some immediate concerns is I'd like to start this process mainly because the other opportunities could come and we may miss the window to bargain and negotiate for extended term with Waste Connections. So it's money county.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're in a position where we should look for extending this and really getting a rate that is beneficial to both of us, but certainly higher than $37.50.
Yeah, and it's definitely higher than what we're paying Green Waste to San Jose. So when we brought it in, it was designated for additional stuff. And we want to maybe can really designate this to our, what are we going to complete and how we're going to mitigate liability with that extra cash that we could have for an additional 5 years. That would have been the first agreement we looked at losing if we chose to do so because we were looking for that independency. Again, we had 11 years to fulfill that, and I think we would benefit from an additional 5 years of revenue at, you know, a bargain rate, right? I don't know what that is, nor do I feel like we should disclose what that is.
Yeah.
Allow us and our legal counsel to enter into these discussions so that we could come back to the board with a proposition. I'm moving forward with an extended agreement with Waste Connections to 2031.
Directors, any other comments or thoughts?
All right, I think we should proceed.
Doesn't matter what I think, because the two of you think. Majority rules. It's a tough one, but I would lean toward continuing it.
Okay. All right, so it looks like we need a motion for this one.
So moved.
All right, I'll second.
The motion is to approve the budget with no changes.
No, not the budget. We've moved on to the
Sorry.
next one. We're looking at the idea of the disposal agreement with Waste Connections and directing staff to start negotiations and come up with an extended agreement
Okay,
for that.
so to negotiate with San Benito County
Waste
With
Connections
Waste Connections.
or San Benito County garbage.
for non-San Benito garbage is actually Gilroy and Morgan Hill. It's the external volume that was
Going,
going to them, but because they have now the non-external volume allowed coming in because of the 15-year ordinance that says no more outside of the waste until they can come to a conclusion. So San Benito's been looking at, do we build a transfer station and continue this methodology, or do we extend the module and create another cell?
to get the revenue.
I think Waste Connections is very interested in expansion, so the organization that manages wants expansion, they have a lot of dollars invested into it over the years. Yet they ran into public opposition in this last year, and so they retracted their permit. Thus just kind of putting everything at a halt. I believe in 2026 is Waste Connections will try to take it out to public and put something on the ballot to allow the voters to make a consensus. Don't need 3/3 votes for that to happen, but if they get it, then they can move forward with landfill expansion without opposition from either the community or the board.
So sorry, I didn't read this down.
No, that's okay. That's okay. All right, so we have a motion on the floor. I seconded it. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, great. Thank you. We'll move on. Discuss support for franchise collection planning for communications 2025.
Thank you, Chair Shirley. Wanted to give an oral report and an update since the last board workshop that was held in February. One of the topics that was on the horizon was preparation for 2030 franchise agreements for 8 of our 9-member agencies. The 7 of our 9-member agencies are currently serviced by Green Waste Recovery. The 8th one is Monterey Disposal, which is serviced for the city of Monterey. Those 2 contract terms both happen to end at a 2030 deadline. So now's the time to start preparing for what's going to happen next. And traditionally, we've hired consultants to help with this process. There are specialized consultants that work in this field. We've worked since 2010 with HF&H. Background on this item is the ReGen Monterey Board of Directors in 2009 and 2010 were tasked with a strategic planning initiative to evaluate district finances in an era of declining tonnages. This is right off of the 2008 recession, and there was 2 different tasks associated with that objective. One was to research alternative funding mechanisms, and the second was to consider the consolidated competitive bid for franchise agreements. So that's how the 7-member agencies started working together. ReGen Monterey's board of directors at that time decided to work with HF&H consultants. There was a process done whereby 2 members of our technical advisory committee at the time had reviewed applicants and proposed that HF&H be the awarded applicant for franchise management for the existing contract. So they've been servicing this contract since its inception in 2015. And it's evolved over time in some ways. I mean, they have traditionally have a certain scope of work. And ReGen was absorbing those costs initially because it was an activity that we had advised, the board had advised doing. Since SB 1383 came along around 2022, there was additional activities that ReGen started doing to support the member agencies, and it was advised that the consulting services for the franchise agreements were all wrapped in and started to be reimbursed by the member agencies, and that's typical of this process. So in 2022 or FY 22, the member agencies started reimbursing us for those fees on an annual basis through an MOU, which went to all of your councils and board. In recent years, we started adding additional tasks, knowing that 2030 was on the horizon. We wanted to better understand how Green Waste was performing, how they were actually meeting the franchise agreement and the areas where they could have improvement. So we had 2 additional tasks that were included. One was to have HF&H create a contract compliance checklist. And the second one was to monitor that contract compliance. We also asked them to develop a new reporting template so we could just get a better high level understanding of where they were succeeding and where maybe they needed additional support or nudging by HF&H. So that brings us to today, and we're looking at 2030, and ReGen is again poised to help support this process if the board would like in hiring another contractor to perform these services. We've already generated a subgroup of our technical advisory committee, which is staff members from each of your jurisdictions, minus the County of Monterey. This particular subcommittee does not have any of the haulers in the room, understandably so, but they are part of the larger TAC, but we're not reporting all these things up to the larger TAC as we would with other subcommittees. So this subcommittee has just started to meet. We've sent out a request for proposals, for time and material proposals to 4 different contractors to see if they would provide us with bids. We gave a scope of work. We asked them for how many hours they expected for each task and what their hourly rate for each staff member was. We initially had a May 1st deadline to submit that, but we were requested to extend it to May 15th by one of the contractors, and so we did for all. So we're looking to receive those proposals back by May 15th and bring that to the board for consideration and a recommendation to hire one of the contractors. And again, so the specific ask, I guess I'll say, is at a future board meeting would be to allow the general manager to enter into an MOU with the 8 member agencies to reimburse costs associated with hiring the recommended franchise planning contractor, and 2, to sign an agreement with the recommended contractor. So I have no input as to who that would be at this point, but like I said, we're in the solicitation phase. We have Nick Becker from Pebble Beach Community Services District as their general manager leading this subcommittee, and he's also offered to be on selection committee for the actual proposals, and we're looking to get other interested parties from across the jurisdictions reviewing those proposals as they come in.
So Zoe, the contract with HF&H, is that ending? Or is it just because we are simply going into this process of trying to understand what our next franchise agreement is going to be in the next 5 years? Like, that's the thing that starts this new process of looking for a contractor?
Good question. The contract with HF&H is an annual contract, so
Okay.
we renew every single year with a set scope of services.
Okay.
And that is, for the services that Green Waste is providing. In addition, HF&H does perform some SB 13.3 assistance, so that's all wrapped into one annual contract. But the intention is that with the 2030 start date, that potentially we could have a new contractor guide us through this process of establishing either negotiations with the existing hauler, being Green Waste, not inclusive of the city of Monterey and their negotiation process with Monterey Disposal if they were to do that. They would lead us through that process of selecting a new franchise hauler. And then if we wanted to keep them on after 2030 to review their performance and that sort of a thing, then that would be a separate scope of work.
Okay. Any additional questions?
Just comments, I think, for the board members and the directors is really, I share with Zoe, like no favorable position one way or another. Is it a new hauler or not? Traditionally you look at, the major services, which is the curbside residential, the commercial and industrial. That's the primary work that they're performing, so they're doing a good job there. Where in the ancillary service is the shortfall? Whether it be in education or what is the move, what is the motive for the education components, the ancillary components to the major three, which is curbside collection, commercial and industrial collection, and seeing what those needs are and what is that interpretation from city staff and residents. I think we want to be very curious about what that is. I also would look at the market and what the market has been telling us when you go to RFP. We've seen a potential scope of RFP be issued in the Salinas Valley 2 years ago, I believe.
Yeah, it's about that.
Yeah, about
timeframe.
2 years ago. And rates came out about 150 times what the existing rate was, so they rejected all the proposals and then went back and negotiated another term with the existing hauler. So we really want to be curious about what the cities and elected officials are hearing about that service from their current provider. And then where is any shortfalls, if any, exist that are being observed? And then how do we remedy those in the discussions as we move forward? Is it a full execution of a brand new RFP? Or is it an extended amendment to those RFPs, and really looking at keeping the rate very stable without seeing a huge inflation component to it? A reminder for everybody when RFPs occurs, is it the opportunity for the collection companies or the haulers to sharpen their pencils and really charge out for all the costs that they're providing at their time. And if they're providing other ones that are in between services, maybe benefit or advantageous for the municipalities. So I think this is this preliminary discussion on what route are we gonna take, where does our curiosity lie? And then I think the biggest piece is you have the existing term with the hauler, they recognize what the needs are for these cities. There may be relationships that exist that outweigh switching over and starting from scratch somewhere else. So just looking at all these different aspects early on and starting to hear the voice of the communities come out through their representatives that represent their municipalities at the TAC committee.
Again, but this agenda item is talking about the contractor who's
Correct.
gonna manage
Yes,
all of
yes.
that.
Correct.
And I'm assuming that they all kind of have the similar type of relationships with these haulers, or maybe it's all separate, I mean,
They all are, they have specific expertise in managing franchise
okay.
agreements.
okay,
Yes, so it's a very specialized scope of work
Yeah.
that doesn't exist here at ReGen, doesn't
Right.
exist within your member jurisdictions.
yeah,
And, really the end goal is to hire a contractor that has the most amount of experience. Because ultimately, these contracts between the cities and the haulers are much greater in cost than the contract that we would be asking for approval to go through this process. So that'll be one of the things that that the subcommittee looks at, that's reviewing these proposals is, what are, in addition to what they cost and will be billed back to the member agencies, what is their level of expertise, knowledge, maybe as it pertains to this particular area, past franchise agreements that the 7 member jurisdictions have signed, that sort of thing. So they'll all have great experience, I would imagine, and are very highly regarded, but maybe who's the best for us moving forward would be wise. And then for the ultimate goal of making sure that rates for the actual franchise agreement are kept low and the services are adequate for the community.
okay, great, thank you, Zoe.
Thank you.
Good. We have 1 minute. The last item was discuss board feedback to revisions of the guiding principles and guiding principles for acceptance of regional waste.
I need about 30 seconds, Chair.
Okay, go
All
for
right,
it.
so we had presented our near completion draft to the board, and we did solicit feedback from the board and received no feedback from any board member. And so I have a couple of options that we could present. We could bring it back to the board and give a little bit more time for additional feedback, or we can accept them as they are. And then as we journey through this first year of some of those guiding principles, we can bring them back at the next budget time and really look at guiding principles to see if anything has changed as we're executing on that concept of CPI plus a revenue goal plus the work that we're performing here as staff. So, if we don't hear any more feedback, we would come back, receive, the guiding principles, and then leave them available as staff and the board, needs to alter a trajectory that we may consider in the future.
Thoughts on this?
B,
B, the second option?
Yeah.
Which is to,
continue, we see some bumps in the road that we can modify. Accordingly.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. I'm also happy with, sending out a note to the board members saying, hey, didn't get any comments.
right,
That's okay if you're good with it, but, it'll be on the agenda this coming meeting. So if you do have comments, get them in early so they can be, reflected.
Yeah.
We could do that.
yeah.
We can do that, and I think staff was just like really wanting more, like, what is that more that you guys may desire, so we can really focus on it.
Yeah.
But we've done the same thing, we've looked at it and kind of said, well, what else is
Yeah.
that we've heard from them, but hearing anything else that we could just hone in on could help us tidy it up right before we bring the final back.
Yeah, I'll just say one thing,
Sure.
under rate policies, I'm sure that 80 to 100% of ReGen Monterey, base operating costs are funded by member agency tip fees. Like, I don't think as a board, we haven't really set that percentage. And so I think, maybe in the future, that's a discussion we wanna have, or maybe 80 to 100% is broad enough that we're okay with that.
It is, and it's still a shortfall, it's still a goal for us, because even after 2036, we'll still have about 24.6% of our revenue coming from external agreements, that was those 2050 agreements that we talked
Okay.
about.
Yeah.
So it does say we wanna improve on that, but there is
Right.
some time that has to
We don't
mature
have
over
time.
time before we can
Yeah.
actually make that 100%, right? I think we're gonna get closer to a point where we do wanna be 100% focused on gate rates paying for our operational needs. But we're quite not there yet.
I thought Garth gave a presentation that was like, don't ever expect to get to your goal, which was, I don't know, but like right now, we're getting maybe 30% from non-external sources, right?
48, something like that, 48, 49%. From your pie graphs.
Yeah.
It's like 48,
Let's
49.
call it 50% just for math.
Yeah.
And then the goal, the vision is to get to 80%. And Garth, you said, great to have it as a goal, but don't count on it, right?
Yeah, more or less.
Might take a while,
Might take a while.
okay.
It could be done in a year.
Yeah, we could do it next year.
We could do it next year.
That's right,
And
it's
that-
not impossible.
And that may be something that we present to the board, right?
Yeah.
And saying, hey, look, we got 10-year projections, this is what it looks like. But if we accelerate those dollars to today's time, what looks like a $60 gate rate increase could be minimized to a 20-some or $30 gate rate increase. Again, I think if that was a pathway we would want to endure, and we were gonna raise the rate by, $28 or $30 a ton, we would definitely need to have a campaign in effect to tell people this is why we're doing it now. It wouldn't be something that I would feel comfortable saying. We went through the judicial process, and now we're increasing the gate rate by 30% by not hearing the public. 5-10%, I think we're gonna be okay, but when we see $30 at the gate rate, there's gonna be people with questions, and we probably would wanna address those earlier in time. That's why we didn't bring that option this year, was because the window was so small.
Well, and when we look at the tiers, I mean, we say if we have greater than 75 years of capacity, like we are gonna be having those external, sources of revenue. So we're not gonna meet
But
that.
we wanna be
That rate
intentful
policy.
with what they're for,
So it's
right?
sort of a
Yeah.
vision, like this is where we wanna head to, but like,
Yeah.
we're not there yet.
Yeah.
Because we still have increased capacity.
Great.
Yeah, okay. Did your comments are in the packet, do you wanna emphasize anything before we close out?
No, I'll say general manager comments for the.
Okay,
Right.
okay, great. All right, we're behind time, so I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for the discussions.